losses. If you have a business with an operating loss and you want to be able to use that against prior taxes paid, so now operating losses are expanded from 2018, 2019, and 2020, and generally can be carried back 5 years. It also applies to pass-throughs and sole proprietors. And if you're a business, this is primarily for corporations that have AMT credits, you can accelerate the recovery of those. You also have the opportunity to increase your interest deductibility for 2019 and 2020. And importantly, for restaurants and retail establishments who in the past couple of years may have made investments to their property, they can accelerate the recovery of that as well. So as we walk through these slides and think about the bill, we want to think of the goals of the legislation. And you see here, all of these provisions are really centered on one idea, and that's improving liquidity for employers. So at the moment, when employers may have reduced revenue or no revenue coming in, it's really hard to pay the bills. So all these provisions really give employers greater access to liquidity. It's not so much about reducing the overall taxes as it is about timing and giving employers more access to the cash they have today to be able to pay their employees. So another provision that's available to all employers is this employee retention credit. And this was a late addition to this bill. The early draft did not include this provision, so it hasn't received much attention really. But the retention credit generally applies to employers. We're talking about businesses, remember, but also nonprofits, for example, who are fully or partially shut down as a result of the coronavirus, or have a 50% drop in their gross receipts in a quarter. And they're eligible for this until their gross receipts get back up to 80% of the prior year's amounts. So think about this. This is designed to help employers who shut down or lost revenue, but who continue to pay employees. So how much is the tax credit worth? It's 50% of the wages paid by the employer, up to $10,000 per employee. And that's a fully refundable tax credit. So you can think about this as a $5,000 tax credit available to the employer. Now, there are special rules for employers with 100 employees or more, and employers with less than 100 employees. So if you have more than 100 employees, the benefit only applies to employees who you are paying, but who are not providing services. So if you think about it this way, your business is shut down, you've had this drop in revenue, your employee is not working, they're not teleworking, but you continue to pay them. You can access this credit as a benefit in recognition of the fact that you paid them. If you have 100 or less employees, the requirement that they not be providing services does not apply. So it's available to all employees you pay during this eligible period, the eligible period being when you shut down or when you have a quarter with this drop in gross receipts relative to the prior year. Importantly, again, here the Paycheck Protection Program, the small business loan / grant program we're going to talk about. If you receive one of those loans, because it is converted into a grant, you cannot take advantage of the employee retention credit. We understand employers may have some cash flow problems, and one of the things for employers who take advantage of this is we expect Treasury to provide guidance here that will allow employers to get an advance on the payment of the credit, which of course will help to pay employees today. So we start to see some themes or some goals of the legislation here. All right, let's talk about mid-size and larger employers. So the bill includes in total $500 billion to the Treasury Department to support loans, loan guarantees, and Federal Reserve credit facilities. So Federal Reserve credit facilities, you may have read about these in the paper. These are the things the Federal Reserve is creating, and for example, to support commercial paper, money market funds, and they do these in the kind of the regular course of business as when we have a financial crisis. They were used robustly, for example, in 2008. Then there's $454 billion of that $500 billion that is directly for businesses at large. There are special programs for the airline industry and critical national security businesses, and they make up the remainder of 454 to 500. So we expect here in the coming days that we're going to see the Federal Reserve issue more guidance about the credit facilities and actually launch them, including the terms and conditions. And remember, this is not going to be a situation most likely where companies go directly to the Treasury Department or the Federal Reserve. Instead, what the Federal Reserve is doing is supporting financial institutions here so that they can make more loans available to businesses. Now, there are some restrictions to go along with this part in exchange for accepting the funds or the benefit, and that could include stock buybacks by the company so long as their loan is pending and for an additional year, and also limits on increasing executive compensation. All right, so small businesses, self-employed, independent contractors, nonprofits, this is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time. And the provision that is getting the most attention here is called the Paycheck Protection Program. It's $349 billion in loans for small businesses. Now, it's generally defined as employers with less than 500 employees, 501c3s, self-employed, sole proprietors, and independent contractors. A way of thinking about this is if your business is generally qualified for an SBA program, you're going to qualify under this program. And in addition to that, some employers, so some businesses who would not qualify, have been added to the list. And that includes, for example, independent contractors and the self-employed. So it also includes restaurants and hotels who would otherwise be ineligible because if you take their accumulated numbers, they have greater than 500 employees. Under this bill, it says we're not going to judge you in the accommodation in the food service businesses. We're going to judge you on a per location basis. So don't automatically assume that because you're not eligible for a regular SBA program, that you're not eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. How much can you borrow? So you can borrow up to 2.5 months of your average payroll expenses. Now there's a formula to calculate average monthly payroll, and once that's calculated, you multiply that by 2.5, and the only exception is that the loan cannot exceed $10 million in total. Where will you get the loan? So a lot of folks are saying to go to the SBA. No, we do not anticipate you'll go to the SBA for these loans. Instead, you'll likely be going to your local, a local or national lender. The list may be out since last night, but we're waiting on that list. But basically, lenders who are already SBA 7A lenders, they're automatically qualified to provide these loans. In addition, the Treasury Secretary is given authority to designate other lenders. It's our belief that here pretty soon we're going to see a very generous designation of other lenders, in part because this is such a generous loan program that is backed 100% by the federal government. So there are very minimal requirements as far as underwriting these loans. There's no collateral required, no personal guarantee is required, and a really unique feature of these loans is that the loans can convert into grants based off of what the borrower spends money on. So we often get asked, excuse me, so there are some restrictions. Sorry about that. So the way this loan is kind of laid out. So it looks at the 8 weeks of your expenses after the date of the origination of the loan, and you get to tally up everything that you spent on payroll, that you spent on rent for the business, interest on mortgages that's tied to the business, and what you spent on utilities. And you can get dollar for dollar forgiveness for your loan up to that amount. And of course, your forgiveness can't exceed the amount you actually borrowed. So there are some conditions. If your loan forgiveness is reduced proportionally, if you reduce the number of FTEs that you have already, that you've had relative to a benchmark period, either the year before or the first 2 months of this year. Now, the loan forgiveness is also reduced if you reduce wages for employees making less than $100,000, more than 25%. And that's a good point. On the $100,000 piece, in your calculation of payroll expenses, you get to count the first $100,000 that you paid employees, but nothing beyond that. And this is really targeted to middle income earners, this provision. So employers can also avoid the reduction in the forgiveness, because we know a lot of employers have already laid employees off. But if you bring back employees and restore their wages, generally within 30 days, and maintain those employees and maintain those wages through June 30th. So if you think about it this way, what the government is incentivizing is it wants to give money through small businesses. It wants to give money to help them keep paying their employees. Now, we often get asked, what if the business is shut down, or you happen to be in an area, like, for example, here in Illinois, where Governor Pritzker has said non-essential businesses can't open. So that doesn't matter for the purpose of this provision. What the loan looks at is, after taking the loan, were you paying your employees? So remember, the goal of the lawmakers in creating this program is to provide assistance, essentially in the form of grants, to small businesses, and encourage those small businesses to keep paying their employees. All right, so here's the guide. So Kev, this is another one that we're going to circulate again. So if you follow that link, it will update to the new guide. We just have added some new information that came out of Treasury, but you want to take a look. This is a 4-page guide. It's been circulated quite a bit, and it kind of walks you through the various parts of this loan program. So on that 4-page guide, it's basically walks you through the 4-step process. You're calculating your average monthly payroll costs, what lender might be looking for when you show up for the loan, and how your forgiveness can be calculated. So another provision that benefits small businesses, the self-employed, independent contractors, and nonprofits. This is the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan. This is the one, Kev, that you just had up on the screen. The one, I guess, the short guide that we have for that. These are also known as EIDL loans, EIDL, and these EIDL loans have been around for a long time. So if you happen to be, have been affected by a tornado, say, or another natural disaster, you may have applied for one of these in the past. So who's eligible? Small businesses and nonprofits, and this includes faith-based organizations. There's really no restrictions on the types of nonprofits in this loan. It's really any entity that's fewer than 500 employees, and again here, sole proprietors and independent contractors. So this one is an actual loan. This is not a loan that in general converts to a grant. You can borrow up to $2 million in working capital that's repaid over 30 years. And you see the interest rates there, 3.75% for business, 2.75% for nonprofits. If you take out this loan, payments are deferred for up to 1 year, so you don't have to immediately start paying on this loan. They made it easier for individual businesses to apply. So your loan is going to be based on your credit scores, and you don't have to immediately produce tax returns. You can get up to $200 without a personal guarantee. No collateral is required for $25,000 or less. Beyond that, there's general security interest instead of the real. Sometimes it's secured with real estate. They're trying to move away from the real estate in this particular instance. So this is an important feature that is brand new to the CARES Act. So if you are applying for an EIDL loan, one of these injury disaster loans, you can request that you be provided an emergency grant within, which they have to provide by statute within 3 days, and this is up to $10,000. So the bill details what you may use the grant for, but there's really no requirements. This $10,000 grant does not have to be repaid, even if you are denied the loan after you receive this grant. So you apply for the loan, you request the emergency grant, you receive it, then you're denied the loan. You still don't have to pay back that $10,000. You should think about this as essentially an emergency grant for small businesses.
So again, Kevin, Kevin, where do you go to get, if you need an emergency, where do you go to apply for this $10,000 emergency loan? Because a couple of people have asked me that.
Sure. I'll get to that, Kev. because this one is directly through the SBA on their website. So I just want to kind of stay in line here, because so first, we just talked about the Paycheck Protection Program. There's some important interactions there. For example, if you end up with both, you generally would end up with both because maybe you've already applied for one of these EIDLs, and maybe now the paycheck protection laws are being set up and you're applying for those, and you can roll those. You can actually roll those together, but you can't double the forgiveness with the $10,000 that would come off the Paycheck Protection Program's forgiveness. There's also some requirements with respect to the paycheck protection loans that you can't double dip. In other words, you can't take out two loans. You can't take out two loans to pay like the same bills for the same purpose. So if you're thinking about both of these, you're going to want to think through some of those restrictions. You don't just assume you can go to all these programs and just kind of stack them up. I feel like Congress kind of made the paycheck protection loan the most favorable, and then these other programs that kind of don't avail themselves of the Paycheck Protection Program, and that includes this EIDL loan. So in terms of where you go to apply for this, and I want to kind of make this distinction. Remember, Paycheck Protection Program, speak to your current commercial lender. If you're going to your banks. For the EIDL loan, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, you apply directly through the SBA at sba.gov. And this is one where chambers and 501c6s were not included in the Paycheck Protection Program. And yes, that we are still working on that for any future legislation, but this is one that chambers are eligible for. And Kev, once I get through, I just have a couple more slides, and then I'm going to open it up for all the questions. I saw some were coming maybe in the comments, which I'd have you read there.
Yeah, I'll do that. Thanks, Kev.
Awesome. So there's a couple, we talked about most of this CARES Act, but there are a couple, with respect to small businesses, some provisions that received a lot of questions about, but they're not in the CARES Act. They come from the Families First Act, which was the prior bill, or it was often called the Phase 2 bill, the second bill in response to the federal government's response to the pandemic. So what the Phase 2 bill included was a requirement that employers with less than 500 employees provide paid sick leave, so 10 days of paid sick leave to their employees if it's related to the coronavirus. Sick leave is taken when you're ill, when you're quarantined, or need to take care of a family member who's quarantined, or if you're taking care of a child because school or daycare is closed. So leave is paid at the regular rate, but it's for a maximum of $511 per day. Unless you're taking care of a family member, then it's at a 2/3 regular rate with a maximum of $200 per day. Importantly, the federal government will reimburse the employer 100% of these costs up to the daily maximum that you pay your employees. This is a refundable tax credit, and understanding that businesses often have liquidity problems, the Treasury Department is taking steps to allow businesses to take in advance on that refundable credit so that you have the resources to pay employees who are taking this sick leave. Important to remember, this is in addition to what the employer is already providing, and this includes what you provide pursuant to state or local law. And there's a lot of talk about businesses with fewer than 50 employees being exempt. So the law does provide that an employer may be exempt, but they can only be exempt with respect to leave that's tied to caring for a child whose school or daycare is closed, and only to the extent that if providing the leave threatens the viability of the business. Kind of a high bar there. If you think this applies to you, this is where you want to go to check out the Labor Department's guidelines that they'll be posting to their website. We're also preparing, if we haven't sent this around again last night, I'll be sending it around to you today. We'll have some additional kind of one-pagers and guides for these provisions in particular. Finally, so paid sick leave is not generally available for an employee where they can telework. It only applies, I guess, if the employee is taking care of, for example, their child, and they can also telework, for example, by staggering or changing their hours. So employers, another bill from provision from phase 2 here from the Family Leave or Families First Act is provisions on FMLA. Those who aren't familiar, Family Medical Leave Act, dealing with paid family leave. It's a law, so FMLA generally allows for 12 weeks of unpaid leave. And what the phase 2 bill did was say that employers with less than 500 employees, so they are required to provide up to 10 weeks of paid family leave if the employee needs to take care of a child due to school or child care closures caused by the coronavirus. And that's the only reason for the extended leave. When you think about the interaction between this and the sick leave, an employee would take 10 days of sick leave first, and then would be eligible for up to 10 weeks of paid leave. Now here, the leave is paid at 2/3 the regular rate. Again, maximum of $200 per day, $10,000 in the aggregate. This is in addition to what you already provide under state and local law. And again, it's fully reimbursed in the same way by the federal government. So there are similar exemptions for employers with fewer than 50 employees, same as the paid sick leave that just went over, and it doesn't apply to an employee who can telework. So I knew that was a lot. I wanted to kind of power through, get you guys an overview of everything we're looking at in the CARES Act, in addition to some of that paid leave. Here are our website where you can find all of our updated resources. I'm going to be sending those around right after we get done with our Q&A session. And then finally, for the small businesses on the line, we have a website called CO. It's run by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for small businesses. And this has where you can find a bunch of our programs focused on small business, has survival guides, tips, and other things specific to the coronavirus that are available for you all. So thanks again. And Kev, I'm going to you can open up the line. I'm going to have you run this Q&A if you don't mind reading those questions, and I'll get my Zoom back up.
All right, well, thank you very much, Kevin. That was informative. I appreciate your help very much on this. I'll go through the questions one by one, and we'll see what goes from there. Somehow I lost the questions there. 1 second. There you are. Well, first one actually, somebody emailed me. So you get 10 weeks for FMLA. FMLA. Is there 2 weeks above that for paid leave? So is it 12 weeks or 10 weeks you have to pay for them for FMLA?
So it is. So you take the 2 weeks of, so 10 days, so 2 weeks of the sick leave, and then 10 weeks of FMLA, so 12 weeks total.
Equivalent of 12 weeks. Okay, that's good. Well, we have several chamber members on here, so this is just pertinent to a couple of people on here. Is this is available for chambers to regarding payroll taxes? Because Chamber of Commerce mean my employees and other chambers. These aren't for all my members here, but for us, is this available for chambers too regarding payroll taxes?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this one. Regarding the individual stimulus, $1,200, which will apply to college students that file a tax return but were claimed it dependent on their parents' tax return. I think the age limit is 17, isn't it, Kevin? Isn't that?
So I'm not sure. I was just reading a story last night this is anecdotal. It's not from what I've been reading in the bill. It's how this has been playing out. So to be honest, Kevin, this may be the case for some of these questions. I'm not sure how that is being rolled out. I haven't read anything in the statute. This has been left to the administration for interpretation, for rolling out, and this was in order to get it through Congress very quickly. I read something last night how college seniors that were heading to college were finding out they weren't receiving this, but I don't know, for sure.
If I find out information again, I try and send out information periodically. I'll send it out to all members. So if we find out more information.
I mean, the individual provisions, this is a big bill, and we've, it's taken time, and as we work through all these business provisions, really, a lot of what we're focused on. I had someone asking me about the local government provisions in here, and it's a new bill. We're working through it. I'm like, we're going to work through these business pieces first.
The one question is regarding to 8 weeks from origination for the forgiveness loan. I heard the payroll part might be able to be backdated to when we shut down in March. Is that true? Well, I guess the question is, if you laid somebody off, or if you shut down weeks ago, can you backdate it?
Yeah, so good question. And if you look at the date, so I'm trying to understand kind of what this individual might be doing. So the period doesn't.
Beth, unmute yourself and ask the question what you want to ask.
Okay. So I heard that for the forgiveness loan, as it was written on your slides, it said once you receive the loan, it's 8 weeks to use it up so that it's forgiven. However, I also heard someone interpret it that you could possibly say, well, we shut down in March and cover the payroll for March and use that as the start date versus when you actually receive the loan.
Yeah. But that's a great question. So the way it's calculated is your average monthly payroll. All right, I've got, I'm understanding kind of what the goal is here. So the average monthly payroll from a year before you're taking out the loan. So you get kind of where you were prior to, the pandemic. So your business is operating, that's the situation we're in. So it's 2.5 times, that's the maximum loan amount. Now from when you take out this loan, remember the loan forgiveness, it doesn't care about whether or not your business is shut down. It cares about, are you paying your employees? So you're going to look, then there's a calculation that's made for determining, the number of FTEs that you had during that period. And if you maintain the same number of FTEs and you don't reduce wages by more than 25%, so regardless of whether you're operating or not, it's just, are you paying your employees? So you can be shut down, but you have to be paying employees. Let's say this, the business you're talking about, let's say it's shut down or cut its, it laid off half workers and now other half is not working, but they're still paying that half. Well, they're going to have to get back up to hire, either you have 30 days to hire back the other half of the employee. Let's say you fire 2 of 4, you hire back those other 2 and kind of restore those wages. If not, then there would be a 50% reduction in that loan forgiveness because you've reduced the workforce by half. Does that make sense? So it's not about when you're operating, it's, are you paying your employees? And for a lot of these questions, guys, I think we think about what is the goal of the legislation, and for the goal here is to continue paying employees. So that's what the federal government is trying to accomplish, through these grants. Keep the small business operating if they can. But remember, in a lot of states, like here in Illinois, some businesses just aren't allowed to operate, but they want to keep that relationship, the employer-employee relationship, intact to get us through this period, so that then when we move back, once we're past it, we want to get back to normal commerce.
All right, thanks, Kev. The question came up with landlords. Are landlords not receiving rent? Do they have? Is there a program for landlords as part of this bill?
Yeah, so I think depending on how we're organized, and I don't know the landlord business, very closely, but I imagine I was thinking about this actually for my apartment. Was like, okay, if depending on how it's organized, if all of a sudden, and I should say, so these loans are available, the Paycheck Protection Program, the certify that you're going to have, that you've had, I forget the language, but let's just say it's economic harm, or that you anticipate economic harm due to the COVID-19. It's a pretty low bar to meet. Then I would imagine like that business, if you're a landlord, and this is, I don't know how you file, but look, it's available to small businesses, sole proprietors, self-employed, independent contractors, like the whole list. So it sounds like it would be available if that's your source of income.
All right, thanks. Okay, in respect to the economic injury disaster loan and $10,000 emergency grant, can a business apply just for the grant and not for a loan and still participate in the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program?
So I'm going to take that in 2 parts. The first is, can you apply just for the $10,000? I was actually, at first time I heard of this program, I was like, well, what if I just apply for a $10,000 loan request this emergency grant. I haven't seen the paperwork, and there might be some more information, Kev, on that sheet that we're circulating. But I think you can just apply for the emergency grant. But to the second part of that question, unfortunately, then you can't kind of double dip there. You can't get the emergency grant and then go to the forgivable loan. What would happen is that would be, I believe, taken off of whatever the forgiveness is if you're participating in the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, if you have already applied for an EIDL loan, so through the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, I believe they're coming up with a mechanism for the $10,000 grant that was included in the CARES Act. Now, remember, the reason that this would happen is because these EIDL loans were in place prior to the CARES Act passing, so before last Friday. So if you had already applied for one of those loans, now there's an enhanced benefit in it, right? You can request this emergency grant. So I believe Treasury or SBA is working on a way to include that benefit. So because you were proactive, you got this loan, you could still get that benefit, or roll this into the Paycheck Protection Program. Does that make sense? So you already applied for EIDL loan, but now you have this more beneficial Paycheck Protection Program, some type of mechanism to roll that, to convert that, the EIDL loan into the Paycheck Protection Program if it applies to.
I was on a phone call yesterday, conference call yesterday, and they said, if you apply, you could apply for a loan and not take the loan. So in other words, so I don't know if that's pertinent to this, Kevin, but they were very specific. You can, even if, so you want to do both of them, but you don't have to take the loans. So that's all I can tell you. I was on a phone call yesterday with somebody, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, so they may be talking about the point in the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is that you apply for the loan, you get the $10,000 grant within 3 days. You might even get it within the same day. I heard Secretary Mnuchin say that that's his goal. But Kev, my understanding, and then not take the loan should you be approved. And remember, even if you're denied, you still get to keep that $10,000 emergency grant. So what they're saying is then you can keep the grant and then go apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. I haven't seen this guidance. If there's a way, it sounds like someone's trying to work the system. What I did see was that you can't double dip, and so I'm guessing that they're going to come out guidance to make sure that even if you applied and didn't take that loan, if you have the emergency grant, that's reduced, that's taken off of the amount. But maybe it won't be the case.
Okay, there's so much information going on right now, Cap. So there's
a
question going on. Was a PPP loan initially the one that was capped at 50K, or are we confusing that with level? I know it's so much information going on right now. That's legit.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a PPP loan originally capped at 50K. So I never saw that. The PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, is capped at $10 million. Inside of the PPP, so the entire loan, that could be converted into grant is capped at $10 million. But remember what it's based off of. So that monthly calculation, when you're counting your payroll expenses, remember this is targeted at middle income. So they capped it at $100,000 annualized, right? So an employee making $100,000 a year or more, you can only count up to $100,000. So think about it this way: if you have employee making $75,000, that entire salary, so 2.5 months of that, you're including it in your payroll. An employee who's making $150,000, you'd only be counting $100,000. Does that make sense? But then the loan as a whole is capped at $10 million.
Okay, I understand what you're saying there. Kevin, somebody actually texted me and asked that how you had the different pages of the different types of information. If somehow on the individual pages, if you could put down how include where to go for the resources. So in other words, the SBA, the banks, or whatever it is. So as you have your deck right there, and each page, if you can say, in order to get there, go to www.sba.com or whatever it may be. If that might be of help to the people when they're trying to go about it. Does that make sense?
I appreciate that. That's a good suggestion.
All right, good. Another person, I've seen information.
And Kevin, I'm just going to reiterate there too that the resources that we have. All of this, that's what we're trying to do, is connect those resources. So the guide that I keep referring to, it's the 4-page guide. One page looks something like this. I know I need to get a color printer, but it's prettier, I promise. This is the one that's been circulated. I talked about it on Good Morning America yesterday, which is pretty neat. And we just updated this last night to include some of the links to that new information that's coming out. And again, Kev, once I send that to you right after, if you would please forward it to all your members. I mean,
do to all my members.
You make sure we get that.
You were on GMA yesterday?
Not right now.
The U.S. Chamber was. I was. They weren't going to let me out. Come on.
All right. Next question is, I have seen information interpretation that the EIDL and PPP loan can both be used, and not loan, EIDL and PPP can both be used and the respective parts forgiven. But this was based on being used in quotation marks for different time periods. And the other one being one that can be used for payroll, other. So in other words, you're asking if you use the EIDL loan for a pay period, March and April, I'm using an example, and in the PPA for June and July. I know that's not real, but if you want to use them for different time periods, they can be used for that. Does that sound legitimate?
So that might be the case. I think what we're getting into is like you can't use, it's like when you apply for PPP, you can't have another loan that's used for the same purpose. I think that's kind of what this hinges on, is that if it's a different time period, then it's not the same purpose. That's a good question, Kev. I'm writing that one down as we look at these time periods. And it's funny because the more and more I do, the more time this is out, the more sophisticated the way these programs work together. That's what it is. I have to tell you, like this bill was written quickly, and we're going to find things that don't align. We're going to find, it had to get done. It had to get done quickly. So that might be the case. Let me check that out. And I'll point out another example for, like, when you look at the Paycheck Protection Program, you think it would mirror up perfectly where, the amount you're taking over this covered period is, for the purposes of payroll. So it covers payroll, rent, mortgage interest tied to the business, and also utilities. But your loan is they're looking at 2.5 times payroll, because then so 2.5 times payroll, that's your whole loan. And then you have 8 weeks of payroll that you'd have forgiven, but then there's another 2 weeks of your payroll that's out there for the loan that's taken, and that's where you could build in those costs for the rent, mortgage interest, and utilities, right? So it doesn't mirror up perfectly, but this is kind of how they did these, they were estimating this. It would mean maybe less processing time for all these loans once we're live. So that's kind of an example to give you an idea of what the government was trying to do and Congress here. So yeah, it won't be perfect. I'm going to look at that, the combination of the EIDL and the PPP, see if that's a possibility.
Okay. Hey, Ken Harris, unmute yourself, Ken. He's mentioned that the $50,000 cap applies to a loan through the Illinois Department of Commerce. Is that something you know, Ken, or is that something that you're asking? Yeah, I can't hear you. Can you hear him, Kevin?
No.
Okay.
Ken, I think you're on mute.
Okay, so then I don't know why I can't hear you, Ken, but maybe I need to unmute you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if you go to the Illinois Department of Commerce website, that'll be one of the first things you see relating to the loans through them. And that's separate from the SBA and everything else.
All right, thanks, Ken. So he's saying that the $50,000 cap applies through the Illinois Department of Commerce, so the IDCs. Oh, thank you. Next question is for the SBA 7A loan. I hear that the SBA will pay the principal and interest for 6 months automatically. We don't have to apply them. Is that true?
I haven't heard that yet. So I don't know. It's not something I've heard. It's news to me, and I will check that out.
All right.
Can you say that one more time, Kev?
Quantum, do you want to ask any more? Is there any further question anymore, Quantum?
Yeah. Well, so the 7A, the idea is that the interest
and the principal and interest will be paid automatically. And the question is, we don't have to apply even. Is that true? I mean, I would think you have to apply, but.
So the interest is paid interest and principal are paid automatically for how long?
Yeah, but his question is that, so if you take the 7A loan for the first 6 months, You don't have to pay. You don't have to pay interest and principal and interest. That just it gets automatically done. Is that? Do you know?
So what this? Yeah, interesting. So what this may be referring to, and again, I'm not sure. I'll look into this a little bit more. But the EIDL loan, so economic injury, disaster relief. So you have 6 months in the EIDL loan of deferred. No, this is Paycheck Protection Program. All right, a lot of programs going on out there. The Paycheck Protection Program is a two-year loan at 0.5% with a 6-year deferment of payments. Okay, now the EIDL loan can be up to 30 years, and there's a 1-year deferment of payments in the EIDL loan. So that when I hear 6 months, that's what I'm thinking. Was this confused with the Paycheck Protection Program? Because there is a 6-month deferment there where you don't have to make payments, right? And if it's going to be forgiven, then maybe it's acting that way where you're not making payments because there's a 6-month deferment and it's forgiven. I've gotten some questions like, how does that actually happen? Like, I don't know. This is something you'll talk to your lender about, a lot of those details. But if you have a 6-month deferment, you're not making payments, and it's being forgiven through some mechanism at the end of the loan, assuming that you meet all the criteria. Remember, paying your employees, maintaining payroll, and not reducing wages above 25%, and it's forgiven at the end. So essentially it acts the same way as what you're describing. I don't know if it lands in 7A or not.
We do have somebody from a bank on there. Barb, do you have an answer to that question? Because SBA, or is it too soon in the process? You don't know. Barb, are you on? Can you hear us? She might be on those right now. We'll carry on.
Excuse me. What was the question again?
Cal, we want to ask her the question, sort of ask her because she's involved. She's a banker who's she might be able to answer the question that you had there. Is it necessary, or is that something she might not know in regards to?
I'm sorry, I don't.
I included Barb Pease, who's with Wintrust Bank, Bolingbrook Bank, and she's doing. She came on this morning to talk to us, use her expertise. You said to talk to SBA bank or something. Is that question that she might be able to answer? Is that not something that we might not be able to have at this time?
Oh, I'm not asking the question as much as I'm saying that throughout the process, Barb, we were talking about loan forgiveness through the Paycheck Protection Program. And I just mentioned I would get questions about that mechanism, like how is it actually forgiven? What does this look like? And I'm sure we will find that I said this is something you talk to your lender about throughout the process.
I'm sorry.
That answer.
Okay.
That's all right.
Let's see. Basic question. Employers should tell their employees to apply for unemployment, and once we get approved, we tell them to stop the unemployment, correct? So in other words, the question is, if you're going to lay somebody off, if you still want your employees to get paid. You still want
I agree. But
so
sorry, we're just getting some background noise. Just if you're having a private conversation, please make sure you're muted.
Who's Galaxy 5A? Can you put yourself on mute? I think that's somebody who's using their phone. If you want to make sure your employees still get paid, so you're gonna tell them to go on unemployment, and once they get approved, we can tell them to stop unemployment. Is that what you would recommend? I mean, I know it's a recommendation, but in other words, we want to make sure the employees can still pay their mortgages. What's your feeling on that?
Once they get approved so when you say once they get approved, you mean the employee or do you mean the business for a loan?
If I'm a business owner and I need, and things are getting tight, so I say, hey, Kevin, can you go on unemployment? And once I get approved for this loan, I'll take you back off off unemployment.
Yeah. So good question. A lot of employers have already had to almost immediately lay employees off. So yes, once you do have, there's a grace period there where you do have time to hire your employee back, so that now they're off the unemployment insurance. You're paying them, and then you are eligible for that full loan forgiveness, if that makes sense. So you've already had you had to lay them off, and this dates back to February 15th too. This kind of look back period. So if you bring them back within 30 days, so this is a part that me and my colleagues were talking about. I think it's within 30 days of enactment of the CARES Act, right? So which is April 20 something. If you bring them back by that date, then and maintain employment through June 30th. That's another important piece. So you have to keep all these employees on the payroll through June 30th. All of those rules apply as a condition to receiving that loan forgiveness. If you do that, then that works. You'd get the 100. You'd get the loan forgiveness. Your loan forgiveness wouldn't be reduced by an amount proportionate to the number of employees you laid off.
You said CARES Act April. You mean March 20th or something, right? You said the date.
Well, 30 days from the enactment of the CARES Act. So 30 days after last Friday.
Okay.
And Kev, if you make me do math on this thing.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Deborah.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys' help so much. First off, I went ahead and paid my employees for the April 1st check because I didn't think they'd have any money until the unemployment kicked in. So now they're applying, half of them are applying for unemployment, but 3 of them I was gonna try to pay so we can still keep in contact with our school, our students. So should I not be paying them? Should I tell them all to get on unemployment and shut everything? I own a school. I'm sorry, I'm just a little confused.
No, that's fine. There's a lot of information out there, and we're looking at how the different programs work together. One thing I'd say, the goal of this legislation is we want to keep employees tied to their employers. The fabric of our society that we had before this pandemic, we want to maintain that. We don't want to separate an employer-employee. Now we're going to go. So there are unemployment benefits in here because we need that as a backstop. But the benefits through Paycheck Protection Program, through a lot of this, the deferment of taxes, it's about keeping businesses. It's about liquidity, making sure that you have the cash that you need to pay your employees. So I think I heard in there you were asking if you should not pay your employees. I think the intent of this bill was to make sure you have the resources you need to continue paying your employees. And the goal is to carry us at least to June 30th. So, in the language, the requirement for a forgivable loan, so you can see the government's intent, is that you keep all of your employees through June 30th. Like that's the last point where they'll be looking, in terms of this loan forgiveness. So this bill is designed, we want to look through these programs to see how do you get help as a business to pay or nonprofit to pay your employees through that time.
So then it would make sense to tell them to all apply for unemployment so that they at least got money coming in. I'm gonna apply for what the businesses do so I can have monies coming in. So if I paid them because I've gotten monies from this grant, then they'll mark on their unemployment that they were working those days. Is that how this is gonna work, or? So
I think maybe what you were asking is, Kevin, I think you gave an example of someone who had employees go on unemployment so they can get paid. The business didn't have that. Now, if the business receives this forgivable loan, then the purpose is to have the money to pay your employees. So I don't think, if you haven't already laid off employees, they're on unemployment. What I would do is the purpose of the Paycheck Protection Program is to have the money to pay those employees. So instead of going on unemployment, they would get that you would pay them. So it's kind of one or the other, right? So for the business to receive the forgivable loan or to have that loan forgiven, you have to maintain that employment. So you'll be paying them.
Okay, now that makes sense. But I heard you say something about if you're working with them by way of computer, internet. We met once a day, once a week for 2 hours. So
the Paycheck Protection Program doesn't look at whether or not your business is operating, whether or not the employees are even working. It's, are you paying? It looks strictly at the business. Are you paying your employees? And if you are, and you're paying them at least 75% of what you were paying them, then you can have that loan forgiven, 2.5 times your payroll. There are some other provisions like the paid sick leave and FMLA. That's looking at some telework things. But in terms of these, the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, doesn't matter if they're working or not. It's just, are you paying them? Because you may be a business who's been shut down. In the state, you're considered a non-essential business. You're not allowed to work. But if you own I know a beauty salon is shut down, right? You own a beauty salon. If your employees aren't working, if you continue paying them for that specified time period, then your loan can be forgiven.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Is there anybody else who has a question?
you.
You can go on again. You can unmute yourself, and if you have a question verbally, if you didn't have it typed in there, if anybody has a question, let's go through those right now. Okay, Kevin, it's been a really good hour there. Appreciate all your help. If you guys do have any questions, Kevin, I talk to Kevin once or twice a week on different things. So if you have any questions that come up after you're done with this, after you look over the paperwork, get a hold of me and I'll get a hold of Kevin. Something, whether he responds to you or whether I respond to you, we'll get you answers. But recognize what Kevin said there is that they had to get this bill together in 4 or 5 days. So, and it's 880 pages. So they had quite an undertaking themselves. So Kevin, you want to finish up something there?
Hey, Kevin.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Keith. Go ahead, Keith.
Hey, I got a question for you. Kevin knows my business, so Keith knows my business. Since like February 15th, when all this stuff started, every one of my jobs that I do rental equipment, so I deliver stuff to the park districts. Everything's been shut down. So basically, every job that I had for the whole month of March, and now as of April, every park district, every municipality that I rent canceled every one of their orders. Now I have one guy that went on unemployment about the 20th of March because I couldn't afford to pay him anymore. The other guy, basically, I cut his hours and he helps me out a little bit. But as of right now, I have no income coming in as far as my rental business due to the fact that no one's allowed to be more than 10. So, I mean, I've had weddings that we're doing stuff for. Everything's been canceled. How do I figure out that? Because like I said, year to year, my stuff changes.
Keith,
So
so
one
Keith,
month
Keith,
as far as
I don't know. This is a good point too. Maybe if are you considered like a seasonal business?
well, I'm open year round. My 90% of my business is basically May through November. And
If
then
you staff up at certain points of the year, you have seasonal employees, there is a provision that allows you to look at a specific date set that's not a full year to figure out your average monthly cost. From what I'm hearing, you're wondering, all right, I don't have this revenue coming in. I had to lay this employee off. I had this other one working reduced hours. And I'm assuming you'd qualify. So if you're under 500 employees, you would qualify, you'd be eligible for one of these Paycheck Protection Program forgivable loans. And I think, we'll kind of end on this to point to this program and say, you don't have the revenue coming in because these jobs are canceled, right? So the employee you laid off because you don't have the revenue and there's just not the work. So what this program is designed to do is look at a set period of time, and this is something you work with your lender on, and there are a few options in there to look at what is your average monthly payroll, take that 2.5 times, and we're gonna set you up for 8 weeks. This program has 8 weeks of making that payroll. Now, if you want to have it 100% forgiven, you'd have to hire back that employee that you were forced to lay off on March 20th. You'd have to do that within 30 days in order to have the full loan forgiveness. Now, remember, you don't have to do any of those. You don't have to be, none of these jobs have to be actually working, right? So your business is shut down, but what the government is doing is saying, we're going to provide that payroll so you can keep the employees on the payroll with the hope of by that time this program ends, we're going to be back up and running and you're gonna still have your employees. You brought them back, and then these jobs will be coming back in. So that's kind of the goal there, and that's what you can be kind of looking at.
All right. So in
Paycheck
other words,
protection
like,
program.
I could go to like US Bank or something like that if they're one of the lenders, and they will have all the information and they could walk me through this.
Yeah, yes.
Right. I would encourage you to check out. So we have this guide here that's going to help you prepare for, walk you through, are you eligible? What will your lender be asking, and what can you expect in terms of loan forgiveness? What's required of you in order to have your loan forgiven? So I really do think that the guide would help you out in preparing for it. And then a lot of the details you will work out with your lender.
All right. I appreciate that. I get questions asked on that's not a problem.
Thanks, Keith. All right, we're
thank you.
gonna end this right now. I want you guys to know, everybody, all my members, I want you to know is that starting Monday, we're gonna have a video conference like this at 9:00 a.m. a couple days a week. And on Monday, I'm having one of our experts come in and talk about, because a lot of us are working from home, how to secure yourself from home, because I guess it's, especially with the Zoom and things like this, it's a lot easier for bad people to try and infiltrate you. So you'll be getting, if you didn't get, I don't know if you sent out an email last night or this morning, but if you're interested, just sign up, and we're gonna try and get you guys through this. We know it's gonna be tough times for the next, whatever, 4, 6, 8 weeks, whatever it is, and it's been tough already. But we're gonna do what we can do. If you have any ideas, I'm available. I'm at home, but I'm available to be talked to. But I appreciate everything. It's nice. Saba's calling all you guys up, see how things are going. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I have people with the U.S. Chamber, Illinois State Chamber, who have a lot more information than I do. And just, Kevin, I just want to thank you very much from all of us. I just got a couple texts from people saying how great this was. So thank you very much for all your help.
Thank you all. You're my neighbors, out in Bolingbrook. Hang in there. And we've got your back, and we'll get through on the other side of this. But thank you for including us. And Kev, please share those resources. I'm going to send them around here shortly. All right.
I'll take care of it. Guys, have a great day. And stay healthy and stay safe.
All right. Hey, thanks, Kevin.